We like to believe that civilization is a sturdy structure built on laws, honor, and discipline, but the story of the HMS Wager proves that civilization is actually just a thin coat of paint that washes away the moment you run out of food. Welcome to another episode of History Glitch, where we explore the moments when humanity's operating system crashes completely. Based on the incredible book The Wager by David Grann, today we are diving into a tale of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder that shocked the British Empire. The year is 1740, and Britain is at war with Spain in a conflict with the ridiculous name of the War of Jenkins' Ear. The British Admiralty launches a secret mission to capture a massive Spanish treasure galleon filled with silver. They send a squadron of warships to sail around the bottom of South America through the most dangerous waters on planet Earth. One of these ships is the HMS Wager. But from the very beginning, this mission was cursed. The Wager was not a warship. It was an old merchant ship refitted with guns and filled with a crew that didn't want to be there. Many of the sailors were press-ganged, meaning they were kidnapped off the streets of London and forced to serve. To fill the ranks, the Navy even emptied retirement homes for old soldiers, pulling invalids who were missing legs and arms and forcing them onto the ship. It was a floating disaster waiting to happen. As the squadron crossed the Atlantic, the first glitch appeared not in the ship, but in the men's bodies. Scurvy. Today we think of scurvy as a vitamin C deficiency that makes you tired, but in 1740 it was a horror movie. The sailors' gums would turn black and rot. Their teeth would fall out. Old wounds they had received years ago would suddenly break open and start bleeding again as their collagen dissolved. Men would look perfectly healthy, but drop dead the moment they tried to stand up. By the time the Wager reached Cape Horn, the tip of South America, the ship was a floating hearse. The waves at Cape Horn are legendary, reaching heights of 90 feet. The Wager was battered by hurricanes, losing its masts and separating from the rest of the fleet. The captain of the Wager was a man named David Cheap. Cheap was a man desperate for glory. He wanted to capture the Spanish prize so badly that he refused to turn back even when his ship was falling apart. This was the fatal error. On May 14, 1741, the Wager crashed violently into rocks off the coast of Patagonia in modern-day Chile. The ship began to break apart. And this is where the real glitch begins. You see, in the British Navy, the captain is God. His word is law. But does that law apply when the ship is destroyed? As the sailors scrambled onto a desolate, freezing island, which they named Wager Island, the social order collapsed. The men broke into the ship's spirit room, got blindly drunk, and started looting. They dressed up in the officers' fancy clothes and refused to obey orders. Captain Cheap tried to maintain control, but he was losing his grip. The island was a hellscape. It was constantly raining, freezing cold, and there was almost no food. The men were reduced to eating seaweed, rotten seal meat, and eventually the leather of their own shoes. As starvation set in, the crew split into two factions. On one side was Captain Cheap, who was obsessed with his duty. He wanted to fix the longboats and continue the mission to find the Spanish treasure. It was a suicidal plan. On the other side was the ship's gunner, John Bulkeley. Bulkeley was a genius of survival. He was pragmatic, calculated, and realized that following the captain meant death. He argued that their only hope was to modify the longboat and sail back through the Strait of Magellan. The tension exploded when Captain Cheap, in a fit of rage, shot a midshipman named Cozens right in the face. Cousins took days to die, and Cheap refused to let the doctor treat him. The crew realized their captain was now a murderer. Bulkeley, the gunner, did something incredible. He used the Navy's own rule book against the captain. He argued that since the ship was destroyed, Captain Cheap's pay had stopped, and therefore his authority had stopped. Bulkeley drafted a legal document, a constitution of mutiny, and got the majority of the crew to sign it. They arrested Captain Cheap, bound him in ropes, and declared him unfit to command. But they didn't kill him. Instead, they left him behind on the desolate island with a few loyal men and a small boat, while Bulkeley and 80 men squeezed into a makeshift longboat named the Speedwell. What followed was one of the greatest survival voyages in history. Bulkeley navigated a small, open boat through 3,000 miles of the roughest ocean in the world. They faced storms that swallowed them whole. Men died of starvation and were thrown overboard. They were forced to decide who would eat and who would starve. But miraculously, after months of suffering, Bulkeley and a handful of survivors made it to Brazil and eventually back to England. They published a book about their journey, painting themselves as heroes and Captain Cheap as a tyrant. The British public loved it. But the story wasn't over. Years later, a ghost returned to London. Captain Cheap had survived. Against all odds, he and his tiny group had been saved by a group of indigenous nomads called the Konos people. Although in true imperial arrogance, Cheap and his men treated their saviors poorly, and eventually, the Konos abandoned them. But Cheap, through sheer spite and willpower, managed to get back to England. Now, the British Admiralty had a problem. They had two groups of survivors. Bulkeley said it was survival. Cheap said it was mutiny. In the 18th century, mutiny was punishable by hanging. A court-martial was convened. Everyone expected a mass execution, but here is the final ironic glitch. The British Empire was embarrassed. They were fighting a war with Spain, and the story of the Wager, the drunkenness, the chaos, the cannibalism, the officers losing control, made the Royal Navy look incompetent. If they hanged the mutineers, they would have to admit that the system had failed. If they hanged the captain, they would undermine the authority of all captains. So, the court-martial did the most bureaucratic thing possible. They acquitted everyone. They ruled that the loss of the ship was an accident and washed their hands of the whole bloody affair. Bulkeley went on to lead a quiet life. Cheap died a bitter man. The Wager teaches us that when pushed to the brink, humans will tear apart the social contract to survive, but the institutions that sent them there will always protect their own reputation first. It is a story of how thin the line is between a gentleman and a savage, and how a wooden world can splinter into chaos in the blink of an eye.